Heather, welcome to the Big Day Wedding Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Sure. Well, personally, I'm a little bit overhearing the question, like, how are you holding up? Or how are you doing in these unprecedented times? So I kind of wanted to throw you like a little bit of a curveball and
Okay.
ask you like a totally random question. So what is your favorite thing that you're looking forward to this summer?
Oh, well, it would have been traveling since I have the whole summer off now, and I have not had a summer off in 17 years. So I would have to answer it that I don't have to homeschool anymore.
Ooh, that's a good answer.
Yeah, homeschooling 3 kids, and no thank you.
That equals a little bit more free time for you.
But it is kind of funny because my son, who's going into middle school next year, assuming that school's open, just recently got accepted into the advanced language arts class. And I think it's because I wrote all his papers for him during homeschool. I'm like, oh no. So yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Of course, then when I helped him with his math test, he got a 64. So, there's that.
Okay. Well, we'll see how he does at the next level
Yeah, exactly.
then. All right. Well, I wanted to dive right into what is on most couples' minds right now. It's how do I plan and or postpone a wedding during COVID-19? I think what a lot of couples are wondering, what I'm hearing is when can I plan my larger, like say 100 to 250 person wedding and get the wedding that I've always wanted?
Yeah. So if you had asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer. But I honestly feel like, based off everything that I'm seeing and hearing, and of course, we all know it changes day by day, that if I were a client getting married, I would wait till 2022. I just don't know that, I have clients in the medical field. I actually have a client who is a PA in an ER in Chicago who sees cases daily. And she was getting married Labor Day of this year, postponed to September of next year, and said that there's a lot of like misconceptions about, what's going on. People are saying, oh, I wish I want to get it so that I have the antibodies and, things like that. And she's saying, like, there's not enough research. We don't know if the antibodies last 30 days, if they last a year, 10 years. She's saying that they're seeing second and third time patients that have
Hmm.
gotten it, survived it, gotten it again, survived it, gotten it again, didn't survive it. So I just still feel like there's so much uncertainty. However, I am trying to remain positive for my clients that feel comfortable moving forward. So it's kind of one of those things, like, if you feel comfortable, I feel comfortable. And my next wedding is in August, so
Hmm.
I am just kind of hopeful. I want to do all of them, but it's just so hard to, you know and when you're seeing like places opening up and beaches being packed and restaurants in full motion, I feel like my whole motto during this time has been, in 2 weeks we'll know more. And then
Yeah.
2 weeks from then, it's okay, in 2 weeks we're definitely going to know more. So at this point, I feel like in 2 weeks we're going to know even more. So um but I have unfortunately had to postpone weddings 3 times already. So May to June to October, May to August to next year. So like I said, every day is different. I go into each day thinking that this is what my schedule is going to be, and I'm going to have, a sprinkle of weddings here and a sprinkle here. And then all of a sudden I get the call, hey, we're thinking about moving to next year.
Hmm. So for couples that are pretty firm on next year, you're going to work with them and try to make them that happen. But for couples that are maybe more deferring to you, you're saying 2022.
Yeah. And, I also, the biggest hurdle for us right now as planners is not necessarily moving the wedding, although that does take a lot of work. And I have personally put some processes in place that my clients have been very accepting of. I think everybody's kind of had to come up with their own process of what it looks like to move to next year, and And there's a difference between being forced to move and choosing to move, because you feel more comfortable. Or I even had a bride say, I hate 2020 and I don't want my anniversary date to be 2020 and I don't want my wedding to be associated with this. And, all kinds of reasons.
Mhm.
We've had to put some things in place, and I think every vendor is doing it differently, um, to protect our income for next year, because, I have 5 weddings I'm already paid in full. So if I move them to next year, essentially I can't rebook the date with people coming in to get engaged, and I essentially working for free. So I've put some processes in place, but the hard part is, I have booked some new weddings during this time, and trying to find them a 2021 date is like really tough. And so that is the biggest issue. Is I feel like if you really want the wedding of your dreams and you don't want a Friday or Sunday and don't want to have to sacrifice, then you have to go into 2022, because all of 2021 right now are 2020 brides.
Mhm. And so, for your wedding that is happening in August, what does that look like? What precautions are we going to have to take for a wedding that does, assuming that does
Yeah.
happen? And what does social distancing look like?
Well, so I really feel like the whole social distancing thing is not realistic. How do you have a cocktail hour 6 feet apart? How do you, if you take a 6 foot round table and you're supposed to be 6 feet from the person next to you, you just sit 2 people at the table, like across from each other. You know what I mean? It's like I get what they're saying, but I kind of feel like it's not realistic, and I don't know how they're going to control that. I also have clients that are 100% not okay with having a mask, or having to wear a mask, or guests wearing a mask. And how do you drink your cocktail with a mask on? How do you eat with a mask on? It's just, I feel like if I were planning my own wedding and I had to go through all of those measures, there's no way. I would push it until all of that stuff was gone. Um, the wedding that I have in August, we don't know yet, at least I don't know yet exactly what the parameters are going to be as far as like vendors. And she has 100 people. So hopefully we're allowed to do events of 100 people then. There is a company out of Las Vegas that is renting hand sanitizer machines, and they're branding them. So you can put like your initials or your name and date on the machine. So, it's not so ugly.
What's the name of that company?
I'll have to look it up.
Okay,
I'll look it up
I'll
while
put
we're
it in the show
talking.
notes. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they actually just happened to reach out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I have other clients that want to do like, branded masks and things like that. But I think for the most part, I have another client that's doing like a really fancy hand washing station. Just setting up like a little mobile hand washing thing. So, we're doing all of the things that we're supposed to do. It's just so awkward, and honestly wearing a mask is very uncomfortable. I do it, but for a long period of time, like 6-7 hours at a wedding, it's like not the most comfortable thing. So that's what we're going to do. I could get a call today that she wants to postpone. Like I said, every day is so different. But those are the things, that we're trying to do. And I think as a vendor, a planner, I'm in a lot of forums and groups and things, and there's a lot of planners that don't feel safe, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can't do your wedding.
I would imagine that in that scenario too, if people aren't wearing masks, I mean, who's going to enforce that? Does that fall on the planners, or does that fall on the venue, or is it just sort of up to what the group has decided
I
collectively, the wedding
know.
group? I'm
I
curious
know.
who's going to enforce that.
I am not really sure either. I hope it doesn't fall on me, because I already have, I'm already bossy enough at weddings, and people are like, who is this girl? So I don't want to have to, be the one to enforce that. And I know there are a lot of people that don't want to wear one and don't want to be told that they have to. I kind of feel like I'm taking the approach that if the client, I really feel like it should be up to the client. If the client feels comfortable and they are okay having their guests and running the risk and the chance of something, happening, or someone getting something, then I need to feel comfortable too, and just do what I can to make sure I don't come home and, give something to my family. But I really feel like it should be up to the client's, decision.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I personally, like, without knowing, just based off everything I've read, really don't see large events happening until at least mid to late fall.
Hmm. How would you suggest that your couples communicate with their guests regarding a postponement? Do you have a recommended time frame? Like, for example, for your August wedding, it's May
Hmm.
26th today.
Yeah.
At what point are you recommending to your couples, hey, you need to reach out to your guests and
Yeah.
inform them that this may be postponed, or to like gather numbers for a future date? How do you
Sure.
suggest you approach that?
So for the most part, everybody's having to make the decision by the time they send the invitations out. So a typical time frame for invitations, it used to be 6 to 8 weeks. I think now with so many destination weddings happening, probably 70% of my clients don't even live in Colorado. So it's 100% destination wedding for everyone. I would say that once they have to pull the trigger on the invitations is when they're really making the decision. I did give one of my clients she's about in that time frame, and I just said, look, because when you go custom, they need time. It's not like, a click and pay kind of thing and then they're at your doorstep in a week. So the girls doing the custom invitations, I just said, look, leave the date blank and like get them printed, and then it buys us more time. And I have a calligrapher that can calligraphy in a beautiful date, whether it's the original or the future. But two clients already, I am on their third round of invitations. So I sent out the regular, okay. Then we sent out another, changed the date to June 26th. Nope. Okay. Now we're sending out another one to October. So, and I think that's why my clients have been very receptive to me charging a fee to move to 2021, because they see how much work I'm doing. I mean, as a planner, I don't send out 3 rounds of invitations. I mean, we're talking 5, 6 hours to
Hmm.
assemble them and stamp them and get them out. Okay, so I've already done that twice now for 2 different clients. So I do, I think that once you got to give people time to plan travel, obviously 30 days is not realistic. In our world, we need at least a month to order place cards and table numbers, and you need to do your seating chart. And, we can't pull the trigger and make all this happen in 2 weeks without everyone being completely stressed out. So I think 60 days, they really need to have a good idea,
60 days.
60 days out. Yeah. So for my August, that would be basically in a week. She lives in California. So that's the other thing. Depending on where you live and where you're getting married are different situations,
Hmm.
like I have a client who lives in New York and is supposed to have her wedding in New York in September. Obviously, New York is a completely different situation than Colorado,
Hmm.
as far as, what's happened in the numbers and things. So I think that plays a lot into it as well. And, at the end of the day, I feel like the client needs to make a decision. Is it important to you to have quality or quantity? Are you going for like everybody on your guest list needs to come? Or are you like, look, these 75 people are willing to fly and take the chance and they're the most important people to me. So fine, I'm going to have a 75-person wedding. Um, because that's kind of a debate too, is, there's older people telling, my brides and grooms, their family, like, we don't feel comfortable flying in September. And so you kind of have to make a choice. Like, so do you still want to move forward and celebrate with the people that are willing to be there no matter what? Or are you trying to get everybody there? And if you're trying to get everybody there, I really think you have to move to next year.
Hmm. It's
So
almost, to me, it almost sounds like two different timelines. You have timelines of people that are having a destination wedding where it involves plane tickets and hotel rooms. And then you have people that may be local to the wedding
yeah,
here in
for
Colorado,
sure.
where it's a lot easier to make it happen in a shorter period of time. So,
Yeah, but I will tell you, this isn't like funny, but it's just kind of, you know, um, anywhere you go for 2021, September 11th is available. Like nobody wants it. So if you want to get married next year, I guarantee you your venue will have September 11th. And I only know this because I have a client I just started working with, a destination client that lives in Florida. that wants to get married in California. And I've reached out to a lot of very popular venues that have like 3 dates left, 3 good dates, you know,
Mhm.
during nice weather and stuff. And every single one of them has September 11th. So I'm like, okay, if you can just get past the fact that your
What day of the
anniversary
week
will
is
be
that?
on September 11th. What?
What day of the week is that? Do
It's
you
a
know?
Saturday.
It's a Sat. Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. So if you
9/11/21. So if you can get past the whole September 11th thing, you have a very good shot at finding a venue that's available.
if you can get over the stigma, you can have
Yep.
a Saturday wedding in September.
Yeah.
That's
I
pretty good.
know.
That's pretty
Yeah.
good. You hinted at something earlier regarding fees, and it sounds like you're charging fees to change to 2021, which certainly seems reasonable. I know that you're a member of WIPA, one of the more
Mhm.
prominent wedding organizations in Colorado and nationally. What are you seeing with other venues or vendors rather? Is that pretty consistent
Sure.
with other planners and other photographers and videographers and DJs, et cetera?
So it's like all across the board. I know WIPA did a call recently, and there was a photographer that said, we are in the relationship business and it's not right to charge, you know, for them to move. It's not their fault. And I totally get that, but it's not ours either. And if you really think about, you know, a planner that does 27 weddings a year, and maybe half the weddings they've made 2/3 of their income, and engagement season starts in the fall of this year, and we book the majority of our weddings from September to February, and all these newly engaged people come in and they want a date, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm already booked. And not are you already booked, you are already either paid in full, or like, how do you replace that? And I think that, you know, it has to be fair. I did a lot of thinking, talked to some attorneys, talked to some peers, talked to other vendors in other categories. And I think for the most part, people are charging. I came up with a scenario where, because I have a team, I said, look, I can move your date to 2021. Now, this is not taking into consideration the girl who is forced, absolutely cannot physically have her wedding. I
Hmm.
wouldn't do that then. That's a whole different deal. This is just a, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not excited about my wedding anymore. My wedding's in October, which is like months from now. We have no idea what it's going to be like
A
in October.
voluntary move.
Yeah. And so I say, okay, you know, I can move your wedding. And if you want me at the wedding, I'm going to charge a 50% rebooking fee. If you are okay with one of my girls executing, I'll charge, you know, a 35%. So far, they've all said, absolutely, we are with you, we want you, and you deserve that and then some. Like, we can't imagine doing this without you. You have done so much work. Like, I haven't gotten any pushback so far. I know that's not the case. I have other vendor friends who have been threatened lawsuits to charge. I have a planner that works for me in Florida who had a day of, and the girl canceled her wedding without telling the planner, and then disputed the credit card charge and took the entire amount of money back from her. And she had already done some work, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So people are, it's not bringing out the best in some people. I've been
Hmm.
blessed so far to have like amazing clients. I know that, you know, I definitely know some scenarios where, I mean, my charge doesn't look anything like some of the food and beverage fees that are being hit. Like, I know a
Hmm.
Vail venue that if you rebook in 2021 and you're not forced to, you have to pay a 50% on the food and beverage. So if your food and beverage minimum is 50,000,
Hmm.
got to pay 25 grand to move. So, you know, 5 doesn't look so bad when you're
No.
curious with that.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say about 75% of the vendors that I have been dealing with are charging something, whether it's 20%, 25%, a flat fee to move. I have a few vendors that haven't had the date available and have said, sorry, like the deposit's non-refundable, which that's a tough one for me if you haven't done any work yet. But like, I'm also a contract, you know, so
Hmm.
you signed this. And I actually had already been pretty protected by my contract because I had a couple of years ago, a couple of weddings, like, 5 months out, we're like, you know what, we don't like our venue anymore. We're going to switch. And they switched the whole entire thing just for that. And so I was like, man, I have to go like replan this entire wedding basically. So I already had a clause in there that protected me if you moved for any reason, thankfully. But I'd say most people did not. I think that I build really good, solid, loyal, trusting, respectful relationships with my clients. And that's why they have said, oh my gosh, like, absolutely, you deserve this. You've worked so hard. Like, we're happy to pay it. I think it's the fair thing to do if
Hmm.
people are moving. And when you really rationalize it, like, when you really break it down, like why people are doing it, I mean, how are you supposed to go into 2021 and have no income? Like, nobody can do that, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah. I mean, thanks for all that. It makes a lot more sense to me why a planner would charge a fee, because, like you said, you are doing extra work.
mhm,
For a photographer or a videographer like myself, if someone pushes from a date this summer, it doesn't really require extra work on our end.
right.
It's lost income. We
So,
lose that
mhm,
date and gets pushed
mhm,
to next year, but really it's just a matter of us, redoing the contract and assigning the
right.
2021 date to the client. So, but if it involves, yeah, sending out another round of invitations and going through your whole,
Contacting every
yeah,
single vendor. Are you
mhm,
available on this date? Getting all brand new contracts from every single vendor. I mean, it's
yeah,
hours of work. And the thing is like, if you, and I know we have some weddings together this year and next year, if you were going to charge my client to move, I would completely support that. But I definitely, like, I had a DJ situation. He's never met my client. He's never done a call, nothing. Literally signed a contract, took a deposit.
hmm,
Isn't available on the new date and
hmm,
will give the money back. Now, I'm not going to lie. Again, it's hard, both sides. A contract's a contract. It says it's non-refundable. I get it. But
yeah,
like, you haven't even done anything yet, and your services are rendered like the day of the wedding. For people that have done engagement sessions or conference calls or get to know each other FaceTimes, or hey, here's a cool timeline, or for a good video from start to finish. I get that you should be compensated for your time. That situation, I was kind of like, and to be honest with you, like, I feel like vendors need to be very careful, because I will never refer that DJ again.
hmm, yeah,
So I think they need to really think about like their future too, being referred by a planner or a venue or whoever it is. Like, is it worth this $1,500 to never get a referral from this person who sends me 15 weddings a year?
hmm,
Obviously, I didn't tell this person I'm never going to refer them again, but I'm not, just because I just didn't feel like that was right, you
yeah.
know?
I've heard about a lot of vendors going forward calling them booking fees instead of deposits. It has like almost like a different connotation. It's like, all right, if you decide to sign this contract now, no matter what, you're not getting this, what used to be called a deposit back, but we're going to call it a
Mhm.
booking fee. So that's more clear. But
Yeah.
I certainly understand, I think, both sides of the argument on
Yeah. So we're calling it a retainer.
that. Hmm.
You're right. You had to change from deposit. And I have a great client who I'm very close. I was friends with her dad before she got engaged. And he's an attorney, so he's given me lots of free advice. He's completely rewritten my contract. It was like really scary. I'm like, I can't send this to people. It's like 19 pages. I don't even understand it. Like, if they ask me a question, I have no idea what this says. And he was like, if you have to say it like this to cover yourself, if this particular clause wasn't in there, like, you'd be totally screwed financially. You have to keep this, you have to keep that. Is pandemic a word now in your force majeure, or is it just assumed? Is a pandemic an act of God? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's all that stuff is so gray. And I think attorneys are having, like, a hard time helping people navigate, all of that. But he did say you have to call it a retainer, stop calling it a deposit. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah.
How are, I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
How are attorneys seeing this? Is COVID-19 considered a force majeure event?
according to the ones I've talked to, they say yes.
Okay.
They are saying it is a force majeure event, but is it?
I mean, they're the
Is
ones
it
that are
an
calling
act
it
of
art
God? I mean, I
or
don't know.
not. Yeah.
That's like really tough. Um,
I imagine
so
there'll probably be some, you know, litigation, unfortunately, that does happen through this, and that will be resolved.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Um, well, thanks for that. I'd like to move on to talking about the idea of reduced, smaller weddings, which some people are calling micro weddings.
Mhm.
And one of your strengths, one of the things I think is your strength, is identifying trends and maybe
Mhm.
even being a part of those trends. And offline before the call, we started to talk a little bit about small weddings. So, do you think that's going to become a thing?
Yeah, so I did a YouTube Wind Down Wednesday, and back in December, and
Wind
I
down.
act
Why don't you tell
wine.
folks what that
Oh,
is?
okay. So Wind Down Wednesday. So I have to start it back up, but it's at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. I go live on Instagram and Facebook, and I talk about all kinds of things. So I've done how to put together a practical budget, to all the crazy stories that I've seen over 17 years, things that have happened at weddings that people would like just die and don't realize how many crazy things we see. All kinds of stuff, top 10 things to do when you go dress shopping,
Yeah.
things like that. So I did one back in December, and I actually used the word micro wedding in it. So I feel so like cutting edge that I like said that. And the reason that I use that word is because in November, the previous month, I had gotten married and I had a micro wedding. It was 65 people. I mean, let's be honest, if we all wanted like 1,500 people, we could just invite all our Facebook friends. So I knew that I wanted like the most important people. I was going for quality, not quantity. And I wanted to like really be able to spoil people over a multiple amount of days and not have to say no to anything, and also not be able to do something. And the only way you can do that is to limit the guest count. And so and then, a month or two before that, in the fall, I started seeing people like, emailing me, hey, we're thinking we only want 50 people. So people were kind of starting to do this before this happened anyway. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is like so great because they're coming in with really good budgets, but such lower guest count that literally they can do anything they want and have anything they want and
Hmm.
have multiple events over, however many days. So I personally am a huge fan. I feel like large guest counts are very overwhelming. The bride and groom, like their heads are spinning, they blink, it's over. Just speaking from experience, I can tell you that as years go by and you get married and you have, start a family and have children and things like that, and you look back 20 years, maybe a handful of those people that were at your wedding are actually still involved in your life, you know?
Hmm.
So I feel like if people approached it more from a, hey, who's gonna like be by our side, like in our tribe till we're old and gray, and like build your list that way. I did another post when I was talking about putting together a wedding budget, and I said, when you're at your own wedding and you're looking around at people, they have a dollar amount assigned to them, like so a minimum, let's say $500 a person, uh, up, 500 to $1,000 a person is how we sort of look at a wedding budget
Hmm.
when you take all things considered. So if you look around your wedding and every single person there is costing you $500 or $1,000, like I really feel like you'd probably reevaluate, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that it's, I love it. I would love to do smaller weddings, small but elaborate.
Yeah. When I first started shooting wedding videos, and I would film the end of the evening and film the party dancing, and put it in the film, every now and then we would get the feedback. We don't even really know who that person is in the video. Could you take that out? And so that made me think of that. It's like, there's a lot of people at the wedding that might be more in the periphery. And like you said, if they're costing you 500 or
Mm-hmm.
$1,000, maybe that money could be reinvested in the vendor that you really want versus the vendor that you kind
Exactly.
of want. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's kind
And
of
when
just,
you have,
yeah.
when you have that smaller group of people, you get to talk to everyone
Hmm.
multiple times over the weekend. You are not going to leave your wedding and be like, "Oh my gosh, I only spent like 5 minutes with so and so who flew all this way, to be here." So I think it's an amazing trend. What I don't want to happen, because this is where it gets really tricky. So let's say we go based off this $500 per person, number for easy numbers, and someone comes in with a 50-person guest count, but now they want to plan all of this on a $25,000 budget. That's where it gets really tricky, because just because it's a smaller guest count doesn't necessarily mean that when you go into a venue that charges 15 grand, that they're all of a sudden going to be like, okay, it's only five now. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So just because the number drops in guests, the budget needs to stay higher, because, let's say an average planner in Denver charges 10 grand. Okay, well, so a girl just comes to me with 25,000. So I take 10. So now she has 15 left. Like, that doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's not possible. And then let's say you charge her five, and then the photographer charges her five. Okay, so she now has $5,000 left, and we have no venue, no caterer, no alcohol, no music, no flowers. So that's where people need to realize, yes, you can have the smaller guest count, but you got to keep your budget realistic to what the market, is charging.
What are the items that do change once you have a smaller wedding? What are
Oh,
the,
for sure. Like, well, so I'd say planner, photographer, videographer, no. However, if you did want to get the cost down, obviously one shooter, you don't need two people necessarily for a 50-person wedding shooting. But if you can afford it, of course, it's ideal. So I'd say for the most part, obviously rentals, catering, alcohol, and like floral, because, you're going from, 20 tables to five. Your alcohol bill is obviously going to be less. And you can do much nicer alcohol. So you can like level up and serve Vouv to your 50 guests versus trying to serve it to 250.
mhm.
So I think that there's still going to be some fixed costs that when people are having a smaller wedding, they're thinking they can do it on a lower budget. And I don't necessarily see that happening, because whether you go into a venue and they charge 15 grand, they don't care if you have 50 people or 200 people, it's 15 grand. So people still need to keep those budgets. I really feel like it's very difficult to do a wedding under 85,000. To me, 85,000 is your starting point, and you go up from there.
Mhm.
And I've literally played these numbers out like live, and like put them in and said, this is what a dress costs. This is what a good videographer costs, not the best and not the new guy. And that's what it.
Have you already gone ahead and created quote unquote micro wedding, smaller wedding packages for your potential clients, your incoming potential clients then, or
I
are you
haven't.
still, yeah.
I have not. I'm still kind of hanging strong, because the thing is like, I don't want to undercut the market. So if I go in and start charging these ridiculously low planning prices, clearly I'm going to book a ton of weddings and take them away from other people. And I
Mhm.
don't want to do that, because I hate when people do it to me. I mean, there's planners that have been doing this as long as I have, 17 years, that are charging what I charged 10 years ago. And I'm like,
Mhm.
girl, you need to like, up your, because then if someone's shopping everyone and the prices are about the same, then they know that's what you're going to pay for a good planner. Like if you're charging five and they contact three other people charging 1,500, like that, it doesn't work. So I take into account that, oh, you want a brunch wedding on a Sunday and it's going to be 50 people. I take that into account. It's a Sunday, it's during the day.
Mhm.
It's not going to be as much work. I still have to do all the same components. It's just not going to be as much work.
Mhm.
um, I take that into account, and I'll take a little off my price, but I'm not going to create a whole entire package off of it. It's still the same amount
Mhm.
of work, you know?
at what point do you think you would create a smaller package? I've heard a rumor, and this is
Yeah.
definitely not a verified fact, that the
Yeah.
governor of Colorado is going to make an announcement in early June that will sort of set the bar for amount of people gathering in one place for the rest of
Good.
the summer.
I hope he does.
So if at that point Governor Paulus comes out and says, you know what, up until September 15th, we are not allowing gatherings in Denver or in Colorado of more than 10 people.
Mhm.
At that point, would you do it, or would you still kind of hold your ground with what you're talking about?
I would I would I wouldn't change my package because whether you have 50 people or 200, we still have to do a food tasting and a walkthrough and a
Hmm.
floral appointment and a floral mock-up, and we still have to do all the same things,
Yeah.
you know? So it doesn't really change the scope of the, my, I have to send out less invitations, but I still have to help pick them out and proof them and,
Right.
assemble them and things like that. So I would take into account, um, that like from a pricing perspective, but my packages are pretty like black and white, and it's this one or this one. Like, which one do you want? Are you
Mhm.
doing multiple events over a weekend, or you just want to focus on the wedding?
Yeah.
And so but I have heard other planners doing smaller packages. I would probably just communicate to the client that my pricing reflects the fact that you're having a smaller wedding. Like, normally I would charge this, but I'm going to charge you this. But yeah, it's still the same amount of work. Like, even for you, you know, you're still doing the exact same thing. Like, the video is still going to be the same length.
I think the only place where it would make a difference for us is hours. So if you
Yeah.
had a smaller wedding where it was just 2 or 4 hours,
Yeah.
then we could reduce the cost, because that is less work for us. But yeah,
Yeah.
certainly for you, or maybe even for like a DJ, it doesn't matter if they're playing for
Right.
200 people or 20
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
if the work doesn't change, I could see just
Yeah.
sticking to your guns.
I would probably do something more creative, like band together with exclusive vendors and say, you can have your 50-person wedding. Here's 10 venues you can choose from. This is your videographer. This is your photographer. This is your caterer. And
Hmm.
it'd be all almost like a wedding in a box
A
kind of
package,
thing.
yeah, yep,
And it would be like a flat fee. So
yeah.
here's your wedding. It's $50,000. You have all the people that you need. And here is, but you'd still be able to make choices, obviously.
Hmm.
Like, you'd still be able to like pick out your flowers and do all the things you want to do. I'd probably do something more like that. And I think people kind of would like that, because then they just know it's done. They know what to expect. They know they're not going to spend more than 50 grand.
They're
So
just
I'd probably,
completely trusting you at that point, that
yeah.
you have the vendors are
Hmm.
vetted. In the past, I think that's been a little tricky for planners, probably because if the vendor messes up, that kind of like falls
Yeah.
on the planner. But maybe in this environment, it's like a little bit different
Yeah.
situation.
You can't pick a vendor that will mess up.
It's true. Speaking of vendors, do you vendors and trends? Do you think that any of the vendors will go out of business? And
Yeah.
I'd imagine that, hey, you're planning your wedding for 2021. We're talking about maybe 2022 before we have larger weddings. Do you
Right.
foresee some vendors maybe struggling to stay in business?
I do, and I'd have to say that the vendors I feel like I would worry about the most wouldn't be the vendors that sell time. You know what I mean? So, like, vendors that sell time somehow can figure out how to maneuver, I feel like, in times like these. It's the ones that have 35,000 square foot warehouses and $1 million worth of inventory,
Overhead.
and yeah, and like 22 employees and things like that. Those are the ones I could see having a hard time like pushing through.
Hmm.
I think that you're probably seeing like companies like Hertz, go bankrupt, and restaurants closing and things like that. And I honestly feel like those companies were already kind of going down before all this happened. And then, you know, they were just like, you know what, it's time to hang it up. Um, I have told my clients that, you know, if they are thinking about postponing their wedding, I'm trying to get them to hold off to like the very last second to pay, their payments. Cause I have some clients that just want to pay. And I'm like, okay, well, just hold on a second, because, I had that one scenario with the DJ. So what if we pay this in full and then you move your wedding to next year and
Mm-hmm.
then they're not available? Like,
Mm-hmm.
then, that like they're not giving your money back. So let's, hold off till the last second. But I do think we probably will see, because this is way worse than the 07, 08, 09 thing. I didn't, were you in doing videography back then?
I was not yet
Were you
doing
in
videography.
Cayman?
I started it in 2010.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
in the Caribbean, yeah, in St.
Yeah, yeah,
Thomas. Yeah.
that's right. So I didn't feel anything during that time.
Hmm.
Like, it was just like business as usual, like nothing, people freaked out during that whole financial crisis thing. So, we'll see what happens. I think everybody's in a different situation. I have been on a lot of forums for financial literacy for women business owners, because,
Hmm.
creative people don't necessarily know that kind of stuff.
Do you mind
And
sharing some of those websites, or maybe we
oh,
could put them
sure.
in the
So
ship?
there's a
Yeah.
Facebook group, and there's a girl that runs it who is just like unbelievable. And it's funny, it's called, so I'm in one group that's for wedding planners only,
Okay.
and it's amazing. It's called the Refine Community for Wedding Planners, and
Okay.
everybody goes on and kind of talks back and forth and helps each other out. Like, oh my gosh, this happened, And so I've,
Mhm.
got onto that. There's another group called Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners, but it's hilarious because men are in it. I think
I
they
mean,
like,
it's
I'm like,
relevant. I'm sure
Robert,
there's.
this is for women. What are you doing here? But anyway, so she's been amazingly helpful with navigating EIDL and PPP and unemployment and
It's been
help.
so confusing
Yeah,
for
and I
business
think
owners.
a lot of people have gotten bad advice. I have, friends who are also vendors that I use who said, "Oh, our accountant told us we couldn't get, the PPP and the EIDL." It's like, no, that is not true. Yes, you can. And so I think that are talking to other people and getting a lot of misinformation. And unfortunately, some of them have like missed the boat on stuff. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
when this started, like back in March, I was like on everything I could, I was very proactive.
Yeah, it's almost like at that time, you almost had to treat it like a part-time job, because
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much conflicting information for business owners.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So I'm hoping that, I mean, I've been in this market for 17 years. I'm hoping that all the people that I've been working with all this time, pull through. Um, I just think it's some of those, that have those big warehouses and tons of inventory and employees,
Hmm.
that it's going to be tough,
Hmm.
without figuring out a way to either get bailed out or, start booking a ton of business. Um, I have a question for you. Have you seen a trend at all with vendors discounting themselves because they're worried? So they're trying to book weddings, and so they're, you
Hmm.
know,
Well, I don't have a ton of interaction with other, you know, with other vendors, with other
mhm,
videographers per se.
sure.
I would say that we are not doing that,
Yeah.
um, for some of the same reasons that you're talking about. It's like we're providing the product, we're providing what we think is the value, and
Hmm.
that does not change in this environment.
Right.
What we are doing is preparing, in the case that we do see an extended period of smaller weddings. So
Yeah.
we are creating, what I'm called micro wedding packages. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So like less hours and yeah,
Less
because
hours, sort of a
I
package,
think
maybe. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say, I think that like with the micro wedding thing, because I was trying to think like, well, if you had a 50 or 65-person wedding, like, wouldn't you still do all the same things? So wouldn't the length of your wedding be the same? But I do think there's going to be some that are less focused on dancing and kind of that whole thing. And it's just going to be like you
Yeah.
have a ceremony and then you're at a really great cocktail party and then you go to a really great dinner party and then like that's
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of, at this point, it's May 26th, and this is probably going to change a couple dozen times, but we have three packages. One is sort of for a micro wedding, they really just want us for the ceremony. And I
Mhm.
think live streaming is going to be pretty important. So
For
it would be like
sure.
a ceremony only video with live streaming. And then
Mhm.
we have sort of like a medium package that's maybe a little bit of the getting ready, the ceremony, and then some time with the couple after the ceremony.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then we have our largest package would also include through the reception to where you'd have like the dances and toasts as well. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
definitely feel like this whole situation has made a lot of people more creative, trying to figure out ways to do things differently, or, do entirely new things, or,
Mhm.
there's definitely been some positive stuff that has come out of it. And I think that with potentially businesses closing, there'll be new and upcoming people and ideas and, different ways of doing things. So there's been a lot of
Yeah,
positive.
I agree. It's almost like right now I feel like we're in a time of like forced innovation. Like
Mhm.
it's either you adapt or you will probably be out of business. So
Yeah. But
um,
I will tell you, I never want to hear the word unprecedented like again. I am not kidding.
yeah,
I'm like, please do not say that word like
that's
ever
why
again.
I was not going to ask that question to you in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, well, cool. Is there any other? Are there any other like final thoughts that you would want to communicate to any
Sure.
couples listening right now?
Yeah, so I would say couples listening right now, if they have not started planning their wedding, my personal opinion, even though no one wants to wait, would be to go into 2022. It goes by so fast, the whole planning process. Like it seems like forever. It's like a blink of an eye. I have also encouraged some of my couples to still get married on the original date. Go to the courthouse, get a marriage license, get married, you're married, and then we'll, focus on the party. But I would say that I would just ask for like grace and mercy from future couples on, if they have to, if they're already kind of down the planning road and they are experiencing, vendors charging fees, to just try to be understanding and be compassionate. I think that once everybody gets to their wedding, they want happy, positive, supportive vendors, not a bunch of disgruntled people that feel like they, went down fighting to be there. And I think that in return, vendors need to try to be fair. I think it's all about just trying to be fair, to each other, and
Mhm.
focusing less on the money aspect of it and more on the like what's fair for everyone, and trying to just really come to, a place where everybody feels like they're being treated fairly.
Mhm. All right, Heather, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
Big
you.
Day Wedding podcast. You're so good at staying ahead of the trends and even I think being a part of the trends. And I have no doubt that Table 6 will survive and maybe even thrive in like the next year or two.
Thank you. Well,
And
our motto back in 2007, I think it was, we had a video on our website and we said, um, we don't follow the trend, we create our own. So that's what we've always tried to do. And every time my 13-year-old says, oh, yeah, this is like really trendy right now, and this is trendy, I remind her, don't follow the trend, create your own.
I like that. I like that. All right. Well, thanks again. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
enjoy the rest of your summer in Colorado, whatever that might bring.
Thank you.